river that never stops moving carves its way through the middle of Africa, so wide in places that a person standing on one bank cannot see the other. Only a green horizon dissolving into haze. This is the Congo River, the second longest in Africa, the deepest river on Earth, plunging in some stretches to over 200 meters, carrying more water to the sea than any river except the Amazon. From above, the land it feeds is a single unbroken ocean of rainforest, the second largest tropical forest on the planet, interrupted only by the silver thread of water, and, here and there, the rust-colored scars of a city pushing against the trees. This is the Democratic Republic of Congo, a country the size of Western Europe, home to more than 100 million people, straddling the equator so precisely that it sits in both the northern and southern hemispheres at once, a fitting geography for a nation that seems, in every sense, to contain multitudes. It shares borders with 9 other countries, more than almost anywhere else on the continent, and yet for most of the world, its name conjures only fragments, minerals, conflict, mystery, rather than the extraordinary, layered, deeply human life that unfolds here every single day. What makes this land different is not its size, nor its wealth of cobalt and coltan buried beneath the soil, nor even its wars, which have been written about more than its weddings. What makes it different is the sheer stubborn vitality of the people who call it home, a resilience that hums quietly beneath the surface of daily life, in the markets of Kinshasa, the terraced hills of Kivu, the fishing villages along the riverbanks, the mining towns of Katanga, where children still play football on red dirt pitches at dusk. It is a country of staggering contradiction, among the richest in natural resources on Earth and among the poorest in measured income, a place written about almost exclusively in the language of crisis, yet lived day to day in the language of family, faith, laughter, and food. This is the story of how people actually live here. Not the headlines, not the mines, not the maps, but the mornings, the meals, the music, and the quiet, hard-won joy of building a life in a place the world has too often only half understood. Morning in Kinshasa arrives loud. The city, home to more than 17 million people, making it one of the largest urban agglomerations on the African continent, wakes to the sound of roosters competing with car horns, to church bells ringing over the Boulevard du 30 Juin, to the clatter of wooden poussé-poussé carts being wheeled out to collect the day's cargo. In a country of well over 100 million people, spread across a territory bigger than France, Spain, and Germany combined, life is rarely lived in isolation. It is lived in proximity. In courtyards shared by 3 families, in markets where the woman selling cassava leaves knows the name of every child who passes her stall. In the villages along the Congo River, the day begins differently but no less deliberately. A fisherman named Papa Jean-Baptiste, or someone very much like him, pushes his dugout canoe, a pirogue, into water still gray with dawn, working the nets before the sun turns punishing. In Kivu's highlands, mist clings to the terraced slopes until nearly 9, and farmers move through it like ghosts, hoes over their shoulders, greeting each other with the Swahili phrase, "Jambo, umemkaje?" Good morning. How did you wake up? A question that assumes correctly that waking up itself was not guaranteed and is worth acknowledging. The pace of life shifts by geography. Kinshasa moves fast, chaotic, transactional, a city of hustlers and dreamers where a single day might involve 5 different informal jobs stitched together for survival, selling phone credit in the morning, driving a motorbike taxi by afternoon, repairing shoes by lamplight in the evening. The city's informal economy is not a fallback. For millions, it is the entire economy, a vast, improvised marketplace of small transactions that somehow, collectively, keeps a metropolis of millions fed and moving. In rural Equateur, or the villages ringing Lake Tumba, life slows to the rhythm of planting and harvest, of river levels rising and falling, of the rains that arrive predictably enough to organize a year around, and unpredictably enough to keep everyone humble. A woman balancing a basin of manioc on her head walks the same red path her mother walked, past the same mango tree, greeting the same families. The day measured not in hours, but in tasks completed. Water fetched, firewood gathered, a meal cooked over the same 3 stones that have held the family's cooking pot for generations. But everywhere, anonymity is rare. People know their neighbors. They know whose roof leaks, whose daughter just got married, whose crop failed, whose son sent money home from Kinshasa last week. Children move between households as easily as their own, fed by whichever mother is closest to the stove, disciplined by whichever elder happens to catch them misbehaving. In a nation this vast, community still functions at the scale of the street, the compound, the quartier, familiarity surviving stubbornly in the shadow of scale. The Congolese home is rarely just a nuclear unit. It is an extended organism, grandparents, cousins, in-laws, and the children of relatives who have passed, all folded into one household under a single roof or a cluster of roofs around a shared courtyard. To be Congolese is very often to never quite live alone, and this is not seen as a burden, but as a kind of wealth. Hospitality here has its own vocabulary. In Lingala, spoken by tens of millions across the west of the country, a guest is greeted with warmth that assumes they will stay, eat, and likely be fed before being asked their business. There is no direct translation for just visiting. A visitor is, by default, welcomed into the meal already on the fire. This ethic extends to a broader collective spirit, known across much of Central and East Africa as Ubuntu, the idea that a person is a person through other people, that one's own well-being is inseparable from the well-being of the group. That spirit takes concrete form in the Likalemba, a rotating savings association found in neighborhoods across Kinshasa and beyond. A group of neighbors or market women who each contribute a fixed sum monthly, with the full pool going to a different member each cycle, funding a wedding, a roof repair, a child's school fees. It is banking without banks, trust made structural. The true social hub, though, is the market, the marché. In Kinshasa, the sprawling Marché Central and the historic Marché de la Liberté are not simply places of commerce. They are theaters of news, gossip, courtship, and negotiation, where the price of a fish is haggled alongside the latest rumor about a football match or a coming rainstorm. In smaller towns, it is the church courtyard after Sunday Mass, or the shade of a single mango tree at the center of the village, where elders sit and disputes are quietly resolved. Congo's cultural heartbeat is, unmistakably, its music. Rumba Congolaise, born from the collision of Cuban Sun records and local Lingala lyricism in the mid-20th century, remains the sound of the nation, its guitar lines instantly recognizable from Kinshasa to Brazzaville to the diaspora clubs of Paris and Brussels. Legends like Franco Luambo and Papa Wemba turned it into something closer to a national language, and its descendant genre, ndombolo, still fills dance floors on any given Saturday night, hips moving in ways that seem to defy the day's exhaustion. Beyond Lingala and Swahili, the country recognizes 4 national languages, including Kikongo and Chiluba, alongside French as the language of administration. There exists a staggering linguistic richness, well over 200 distinct languages spoken across the country's provinces, each carrying its own oral traditions, proverbs, and origin stories passed from grandmother to grandchild by firelight rather than by page. Football is the nation's other great unifier. The Leopard, the men's national team, can bring entire cities to a standstill, and a goal scored in a World Cup qualifier is a reason for strangers to embrace in the street. In the East, particularly in the Kivas, wrestling and traditional dance performances, accompanied by the deep, resonant tones of the Laikembe thumb piano, mark harvests, weddings, and the passing of chiefs. And every year, the country's Independence Day, the 30th of June, transforms into a day of pride tinged with reflection, a marker of the moment in 1960 when Congo, under Patrice Lumumba, first raised its own flag, a moment locals remember with far more complexity and emotional weight than most outside accounts allow. For generations, the Congolese economy has rested on the forest and the field, cassava, plantain, and maize grown on small family plots, palm oil pressed by hand in the Bandundu region, and fish drawn from the river and Lake Tanganyika, smoked over open fires and carried to market on the backs of bicycles reinforced to carry loads far beyond their design. But beneath the soil lies a different kind of wealth entirely. The DRC holds an extraordinary share of the world's cobalt reserves. Estimates suggest well over half of global supply. Mined largely from the copper belt around Lubumbashi and Kolwezi and Haut-Katanga and Lualaba provinces, a mineral now essential to the batteries powering electric vehicles and smartphones worldwide. This has pulled the country into the center of a global industry it did not choose, and the tension between artisanal miners working with hand tools and the industrial operations of multinational firms is one of the defining economic contradictions of modern Congo. Kinshasa and Lubumbashi have become the country's economic engines, drawing rural migrants in search of wage labor, construction work, and the informal trade that keeps much of the urban economy afloat. Along the eastern border, the trade in gold and coffee moves through Goma and Bukavu, cities whose economies are tied as much to Rwanda and the wider Great Lakes region as to Kinshasa itself, 1,000 kilometers and a world away. Timber, too, remains a quiet economic force. Logging concessions carved into the rainforest, supplying hardwood to markets as far as Europe and China, an industry that sits uneasily alongside the country's role as one of the planet's great carbon sinks. Yet, for most families, the old economy and the new one exist side by side. A father working a cobalt-adjacent supply job by week, a mother selling cassava flour or fufu base at the same market her own mother once worked, a teenage son running a mobile money kiosk on a corner that a generation ago held nothing but a footpath. Mobile banking, in fact, has leapt ahead of traditional banking infrastructure entirely in much of the country, money transferred by phone between provinces that still lack a single paved road connecting them. Tradition is not something the modern economy replaced. It is the floor it still stands on. To eat in Congo is to understand its history in a single meal. Fufu, a dense, pillowy dough pounded from cassava or plantain, anchors nearly every table. Its slightly sour, starchy weight, meant to be torn by hand and used to scoop up whatever sauce accompanies it. It is comfort in its most literal form, the dish a homesick Congolese abroad will crave before anything else. Pondu, cassava leaves pounded fine and stewed slowly with palm oil, peanut paste, and sometimes smoked fish, carries the deep, earthy taste of the forest itself. Mwambe, chicken simmered in a rich red palm nut sauce, is the dish of celebration, the one that appears at weddings, at Christmas, at the table when a son returns from years away. In the East, ugali, the maize-based staple shared across much of East Africa, takes fufu's place, evidence of the country's blend of Central and East African influence. And makayabu, salted dried fish soaked and stewed with tomatoes and onions, tells the story of a country whose rivers have always fed it, even in seasons when little else could be grown. Cassava itself carries a weight beyond nutrition. It was the crop that could survive drought, war, and neglected soil. The plant families turned to when everything else failed, and so it holds a kind of unspoken gratitude in the culture, a food of last resort that became a food of identity. Coffee, grown in the highlands of Kivu and Ituri, plays its own quiet social role, not gulped down alone but shared, poured for visitors as an unspoken gesture that a conversation is about to begin and is not to be rushed. In Kinshasa's more affluent quarters, a new culinary scene is emerging, fusion restaurants blending Congolese staples with French and Lebanese influence. But even there, the cooks will tell you, the real food, the food that matters, is still made at home, on charcoal, by someone's mother. Landscape and nature. The land itself resists easy description. The Congo Basin rainforest stretches across roughly 60% of the country's territory, a canopy so dense that explorers once described losing all sense of direction beneath it within minutes. To the east, the land buckles upward into the Virunga Mountains, home to Virunga National Park, Africa's oldest national park, established in 1925. where mist-shrouded volcanoes like Nyiragongo, with its churning lava lake, rise above forests sheltering some of the last mountain gorillas on Earth. Further south, Lake Kivu stretches out in improbable blue calm, its waters occasionally releasing dissolved methane in ways that have shaped both local legend and serious scientific study. To walk in the Congolese rainforest is to feel the temperature drop the moment the canopy closes overhead, to hear a chorus of insects so constant it becomes a kind of silence, to feel the ground underfoot spongy with centuries of fallen leaves. Fishing and farming remain the country's most intimate relationship with its land. Nets cast at dawn, plots cleared by machete, a rhythm passed down rather than taught, and scattered through the eastern highlands are the terraced hillsides of Kivu, slopes carved by generations of farmers into staircases of beans, sorghum, and sweet potato, a human signature written into the landscape itself, proof that people have been coaxing a living from these hills for longer than anyone living can remember. Movement through Congo is an exercise in adaptation. The country has historically had one of the lowest road density ratios in Africa relative to its size, and so the river remains, as it has for centuries, a highway in its own right. Barges stacked absurdly high with goods and passengers drifting for days between Kinshasa and Kisangani, a journey that becomes its own floating village, complete with cooking fires and makeshift markets on deck. On land, the contrast is vivid. A paved boulevard in central Kinshasa gives way within a few kilometers to red laterite roads that turn to thick clay soup in the rainy season, navigated by motorbike taxis known as Wiwa, with a skill that borders on theatrical. Air travel connects the country's far-flung provincial capitals in ways roads simply cannot, and the drone of small aircraft over the forest canopy is, for many rural communities, the only regular link to the wider nation. This is not a broken system so much as an improvised one. Infrastructure that reflects a country still writing its own connective tissue, modern enough that a traveler can move between its great cities, unspoiled enough that much of the journey still happens exactly as it did a generation ago. For young Congolese, the path forward is rarely a straight line. Primary education has expanded significantly in the past 2 decades, yet quality varies enormously between Kinshasa's better-funded schools and rural classrooms, where one teacher may face 80 students beneath a tin roof. For those who can, the pull toward the city and further toward universities in Lubumbashi, Goma, or abroad in Belgium and France is powerful, chasing opportunities the village cannot offer. But something pulls many of them back. It is rarely one thing. It is the specific taste of a mother's pondu, the particular cadence of a home dialect, the football pitch where a name still means something. Young musicians increasingly root their sound in Congolese rumba rather than abandoning it for purely Western genres, treating heritage not as something to escape, but something to reinvest in. The central challenge remains stark. Economic opportunity has not grown at the pace of the population, and for a country where roughly 2/3 of citizens are under 25, that gap is the defining tension of the coming decade. Yet there is no shortage of ambition. Young entrepreneurs building mobile money platforms, young artists reclaiming Rumba for a new generation, a hopefulness that persists precisely because it has to. As the equatorial sun drops fast, there's little twilight this close to the equator. The day's productive energy folds into something communal. In Kinshasa, the Nganda, an open-air bar often no more than a few plastic chairs and a generator-powered speaker, fills with neighbors nursing bottles of Primus beer as Rumba spills into the street. Laughter carries further at night here. Arguments about football are louder, more theatrical, more affectionate than they seemed at noon. In the villages, evening means the fire. Cooking finished, children gathered close, the older generation slipping into storytelling, folding proverbs and warnings and jokes into tales told entirely from memory. There's a word for this feeling of settled, domestic warmth that recurs across Congolese homes, the sense of being chez soi, fully, safely, at home, doors open to the humid night air, a radio murmuring somewhere, the day's noise finally quiet. Challenges and contradictions. None of this can be told honestly without acknowledging what the people themselves grapple with daily. The conflict in the eastern provinces, North Kivu and Ituri in particular, where armed groups have displaced millions over recent years, remains a wound the country carries even as life continues around it. Rural depopulation quietly hollows out farming communities as young people chase Kinshasa's promise. Inflation and the volatility of the Congolese franc make daily budgeting a genuine act of resilience for urban families. And the paradox of mineral wealth persists. A nation sitting atop reserves worth the fortunes of empires, where many communities near the mines themselves see little of that value return to their own roads, schools, or clinics. There is, too, the strain on the cities themselves. Kinshasa's infrastructure, built for a fraction of its current population, straining under the weight of a metropolis that has grown faster than its roads, its clinics, its power grid could ever keep pace with. Electricity remains unreliable even in the capital, despite the country holding some of the greatest hydropower potential on the continent, largely untapped at the vast Inga Falls on the lower Congo River, a resource so significant that some have called it capable of powering much of the continent, and yet one that remains for now mostly a promise. These are not abstractions debated from a distance. They are the dinner table conversations of ordinary Congolese families, weighed with the same seriousness as anywhere else in the world, because it is their future, and they intend to shape it themselves. So why, in a world of infinite elsewhere, do people stay? They stay for the Like-Lemba circle that will cover a hospital bill no insurance would touch. They stay for the smell of pondu simmering on a Sunday, a smell that means, unmistakably, family. They stay for a Roomba bass line that makes a body move before the mind has agreed to it. And they stay, most of all, for each other, for a form of belonging that 100 million people spread across a forest the size of a continent have somehow managed to hold on to through every difficulty history has handed them. The Congo River keeps moving the way it always has, indifferent to borders and headlines alike, carrying silt and stories to the sea, and along its banks, in courtyards and kitchens and market stalls, life goes on being built the same patient way it always has, not despite the difficulty, but through it, and often, remarkably, in spite of everything the world assumed it knew. If this journey through Congo moved you, there's a whole world still waiting. Real places, real people, stories rarely told with the care they deserve. Subscribe and turn on notifications to join us for what's next. Another country, another river, another life worth understanding. We'll see you there.